Welcome to the Shed and Shine podcast. I am Gino Wickman. This is where Rob Dube and I help driven entrepreneurs shed their shit, free their true selves, unlock true entrepreneurial freedom, and shine. We truly appreciate you taking the time to spend with us, and we hope to make a huge impact on you.
Hello, and welcome to the Shed and Shine podcast, where we discuss how looking inward is the key to unlocking true entrepreneurial freedom. I'm Rob Dube. I'm here with my very good friend, Gino Wickman. Hello again, Gino.
Hello again, Rob.
Gino and I are the co-authors of the book Shine, How Looking Inward is the Key to Unlocking True Entrepreneurial Freedom. And we are the co-founders of the 10 Disciplines. And I know I speak for Gino when I say how much gratitude we have that you are listening in today. You have many choices on how to spend your time. So we truly appreciate you taking your time to learn with us. And we are here to make a huge impact on you. And today we hope to do that through our conversation around shedding layers. So, Gino, what I'd like to do is build on our previous episodes, specifically where we started to share high-level overview of what it means to shed and what it means to shine. And obviously today we're going to focus on shedding layers. So can you talk again, just kind of restate, what does it mean to shed layers?
Yeah, great. So I'll do my best again to try to create a context that puts this whole conversation we're about to have in a nutshell. So shedding layers, if we go back to my riff that describes, your true self as this bright ball of energy vibrating high, your essence, your soul, whatever you want to call it, and it's wrapped in this cocoon that is your ego trying to protect you from the world. Shedding layers is just simply removing some of the cocoon, and we can use different analogies. We could call those layers. We could call that a suit of armor. We could call that a block of marble that needs to be chipped away to reveal the masterpiece statue that is you, but it's just simply the dissolving of the ego. It's the letting go of all the stuff you're hanging on to from the past.
What is this stuff? I mean, when you talk about that, and, one of the notes I actually made is, there's a lot of talk these days about this stuff, the past. Some people actually say, I don't want to deal with the past. That's over. There's a lot of talk about this idea of trauma, big T trauma, little t trauma. So we're hearing those kinds of things as well. So can you talk a little bit about how this is real? What is this thing from the past that kind of holds us up to a certain degree or to a big degree?
Yeah. And what I hope to accomplish, and what I've shared in my riff and what we'll accomplish on this episode is this visual image, this vivid visual image, again, of seeing that bright ball of light that is you trapped inside of that cocoon, because I think that's the best way to answer your question. Mm-hmm. Because it's removing that. And yes, so the common words being used and are very popular is wounding, is trauma. It's been called so many things because it's also conditioning. And so I feel like it's anything that isn't that bright ball of energy at the center, that isn't that soul that you have, that true self of yours. So anything that isn't that is what needs to be shed. And so conditioning, what we're talking about there is, that's how you were raised the first 10 years and what your parents taught you and your teachers taught you, that some things don't align with your true self, that you have been being that for them for decades and your soul just doesn't want to do it anymore. It's exhausted. But just as quickly, it is that thing that happened to you when you were 7 years old. It is that time you got bullied when you were 14 years old. It's all that stuff. Here's the beauty. What I believe is that you can shed it all in a snap. Now, I think 1 out of a million can do that. Hopefully, everyone will be able to do that someday. So the process of shedding is not always that easy. And for someone like me, one of the unfortunate ones, it's taken decades, but I believe there are people that will literally instantly shed because all it is just letting it all go. Easier said than done, but it's just letting it all go. And I know for me, my ego is hanging on to those stories so tight that it has defined me. It is my personality, and it created a personality to protect myself from all of it. So it's hanging on so tight that I got to go get help. I got to seek other ways to do it, to let it go, because for some reason I just can't do it on my own. It wouldn't surprise me if someday I'll just have an aha moment and I'll let it go. Now, there are people that almost die, and that's what it took, and they just let it go. There are people that have massive heart attacks. There are people that have life situations that there's that snap, just let it go because it took that. So I believe we can let it go quickly. So it's ultimately, you get to decide how long the process takes, but it's the shedding of that protective layer, that cocoon, your ego, that is running the show.
Yeah, there's a couple interesting things that came up for me while you were talking. The first is I always try to take myself back to the time I was born, which I can't remember. And what was I when I came out before the world got a hold of me? You and I have talked about that before. And, that is an image for me where I felt real innocent. But then all of a sudden I was getting passed around and people were talking and things were going in my brain and so on and so forth into my mind. And there you go. Then I started to get this persona and create a way that I would see the world, a way that I would feel based on reactions to circumstances, things of that nature. This is a little deep, but hey, I'm just going to go there. What the heck? Some people say there are past imprints that you bring with you into this life. If you believe in that kind of thing, I don't know. What do you think about that kind of thing? I always wonder about that.
Yeah. So if I maybe, I want to say something to your earlier comment, because you jumped to that pretty fast. So let me just finish that previous point, and then we'll go to that very heavy place you just went. So, because I just, had a mini shedding of something, because when you talked about, I believe that, and it's been said a million ways, that we're born our innate selves. We're born perfect. We're born our true self. And then the world gets a hold of us. And so what happened for me is, what I thought about is the first time we're judged, and I got very emotional because I went back to like age 6 or 7 and pictured the first time on the playground I was looked at in a judging way by another kid. Like it's like this thing. What is that? I'm not familiar with that thing. And like that was the starting point where, okay, I got to start being this so that everybody accepts me. And then all of a sudden, there we go. We start the layers start to build, the facade starts to build. So that got me very emotional thinking about that. And that also kind of helped me shed a little bit there. But the point there is, we're born our innate self, and then we just start to build the shell. But I'm staying on this conditioning word because that's an example of conditioning, because, I don't think you could call that trauma. I don't think you can call that pain. That was conditioning. Yeah. So I want to try to expand this because, I mentioned in the previous episode about when I'll speak to an audience of driven entrepreneurs, some of them are sitting there going, oh, Gino, that poor guy. Thank God I don't have any trauma or pain. And I believe that might be true for some, that they never had any trauma or pain. But let's look at conditioning. Any conditioning that went on in your life, a way you're being right now that isn't really you, that you learned from your parents or your brother or your sister or your neighbor or your teacher or whatever it was, that you don't want to be that way anymore. Well, that needs to be shed. It's a story you're hanging on to. So that's what it is. They're all stories we're hanging on to. We just got to shed all those stories. And again, we can do it in this instant. Now I'll jump to your question. And it's funny because I wish you would save that question. Let me ask, can I ask this? Can you save that question for last? Because let's shed all our shit in this lifetime before we go to all the past lifetimes. Let's learn here, and then we'll tackle all the way back to the dinosaur age.
So do you mean the last episode ever or this? No, I'm just kidding, Gino. I'm just kidding. I was thinking about, some of the experiences that I've had, and I share in the book a little bit about going to therapy earlier on in my 20s, early 20s. And I had no idea really what was happening at that point. I didn't know I was shedding. I was very much in my mind, very much analytically trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Why did I feel the way I feel? I didn't want to feel that way anymore. And then that brought me, for those that have been to therapy, and if you haven't, then you'll learn a little part of it right now, is this analytical, like, okay, I connected this dot to that dot to this dot, and that's why I'm like I am. And I'm thinking, as I reflect, it didn't necessarily help me shed so much. Actually, it was really painful. And it stuck with me a little bit longer. So I really had to continue to learn, like, how do I let this go? And I'm just curious, do you have any thoughts about that or anything come up for you about that?
It doesn't. And maybe I'm not understanding the question, but I mean, literally that prompted nothing for me.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Yeah. It's
So,
just an
but
experience. I wondered if you had anything similar because we all have such a different experience when it comes to this, is what I'm trying to share.
yeah. And so, and maybe ask it a different way, or maybe share your experience and that'll prompt something for me. But it's almost like your question was the answer to me. I don't know how else to say it. So
Yeah.
for what that's worth.
No, that's perfect. So let's talk about maybe some of the how the past is playing a role in your life and when you started to notice this. Because as I mentioned, I noticed it, in my 20s that something was up. When did you notice it and begin to realize that, you know what, I can do something about this, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And so, lightning fast, since my story's been told, again, trauma all the way up to age 15, alcohol touches my lips, it numbs me. My ego's like, aha, we figured this thing out. Let's push it all down, create a persona and a package and a facade, and let's just go forward and build an empire. And that's what I did. And so during that 35 years of creating what I created with that ego, there were definitely glimpses and opportunities along the path. So I think age 30 was the first little pinging of my soul. It was reading Celestine prophecies and just being, exposed to this world, that we may have a soul in this energy source inside of us. And it kind of pinged me and let a little light in or a little light out. And so I got a little sense there. And then I started throughout my 30s traveling to Boulder with some friends, and the three of us would go do these really cool experiences where we'd engage somebody to kind of take us deep. And that's when I started calling it shedding layers, because I'd go through an experience where I'd shed a layer, I'd cry. And so it started there in my 30s and 40s, but it really didn't happen in a big way until age 52 for me. So dig a little deeper on that if I'm not answering your question point blank, because I wanted to give that history and timeline.
No, that's perfect. I'm just always curious when somebody gets pinged, and the person started to say to themselves, like I did when I was in my early 20s, like, I got to do something here. I just can't keep going the way I'm going, because actually a lot of people do keep going the way they're going and they're fine with it.
Yeah. And what that prompts for me is, so that it was definitely 30 when I got pinged for the first time. And it was like this thought, like, whoa, there's something more going on here. That was kind of the feeling, if that makes any sense. There's something more going on here. But what's important to note, though, is what I always felt below the surface in my central nervous system, the tectonic plates I described, was still always that uneasiness, that anxiety, that pressure, that it was always there for those whole 35 years. So while I was shedding layers and maybe I was lightening it up more and maybe I was becoming more and more aware, I didn't become fully aware until it erupted at age 52. So for what that's worth, because I always thought it was normal to go through life feeling that, like I can feel it in my body right now, like I'm being reminded of it. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, how on earth did I survive living with that for 35 years? And the truth of the matter is, I got a heart issue, so that I almost didn't survive, So thank God something wants to keep me around. But for what that is worth, I know that's not hitting your question exactly, but I
It's okay.
just felt the need to share that
Yeah.
in the hopes that somebody relates to it.
Yeah. Have you found it to be hard work? And the reason I asked that question is one of the therapists that I've worked with, he says to me, healing doesn't need to be hard. And I keep saying to him, it sure feels fucking hard. I don't know. When's the not hard part going to happen? Will you let me know? It does feel hard to me, and I'm really working on that. I'm trying to work through it not feeling hard. I'm curious, how is it for you?
Yeah, I'm still in hard mode. But I will say this though, every time I shed, it is followed by bliss. So,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to call that hard.
Mhm.
Um, but man, it's processing something, growing pains. It's like every time I grow to the next level a little bit, like somebody described it really well to me. They described it like what a hermit crab goes through, because what a hermit crab does, apparently, this is sharing what she shared with me, is it grows into its current new shell. And once it grows into that shell, it kind of outgrows that shell. And so it has to leave that shell and go find a larger shell to go into to grow into that. And so between the old shell and the new shell, they're exposed, they're very vulnerable. And so I describe it as a raw nerve. It's just this raw nerve, uncomfortable, exposed, vulnerable feeling each time I grow to the next level. But it's worth it because you get to that next level and it's like, oh, it's just better. It just keeps getting better. But for me, still hard and painful each time I have one of those growth spurts.
I'm curious because one comes to mind for me, and I could share first if you want me to. You let me know. But what do you feel like has been one of the hardest experiences you've had?
Mm. Well, I think what's helpful for the audience is to give them some examples of the resources we've used to shed layers. Okay. And so
Yeah, of
I'm gonna share mine, and I'm gonna ask you to please share some of yours, because I think
course.
that will really take us right to the question you're asking, because I really want to try and go into some specifics if we can. And so I want to share a funny story first, because I have done a lot of shit. And what I've learned, I spent a lot of money on a lot of shit, but I just love it. I'm drawn to it. I'm a seeker. And the point I want to make in this is I don't think it's necessary to do that much stuff. So I want to lay down this disclaimer that you could literally only choose one resource and you will shed all your layers. So please don't go do all the stuff I did. I'm a magnet to it. I just love it. Anything I can find that's woo woo or whatever, I'll go do it. I just love it. And I feel like I'm almost like called to do it for God knows what reason. But in saying that, one of my favorite books that taught me to shed layers is Letting Go by David Hawkins. And in the introduction of the book, it's the funniest thing, because he does this 3-page long riff where he talks about, you have probably tried, and then he lists like 100 different resources and ways to shed layers. And ultimately his point after the 3-page riff is he said, you don't need any of that. You can do this yourself. So I want to start with that really important point. But what's painful is I have literally done 1/3 of the things that he listed in his long riff. So each time it was like a punch in the gut, because I'm one of those people that's just a seeker for all this stuff. And so probably the top 4 ways that I have, or maybe the 4 best examples I can give for how I've shed layers, is therapy. There are 3 times in my life that I sought therapy. The first time, I wasn't willing to be totally honest with myself, so maybe it helped 10%. The second time, maybe I was halfway there. The third time, and this was after my awakening at 52, I was ready to be totally honest. That was very profound. Number 2 is books. Books do help me. So like I said, Letting Go and Untethered Soul were probably the 2 clearest books for me to clearly understand the process for letting go and shedding a layer. So that was very profound for me. Meditation is probably my number 1 way of shedding layers. in anything that I've ever done, that has been the most profound. So I try to meditate 3 to 5 times a week. I try to get to 30 minutes a morning. And I've tried plant medicine. Plant medicine is healing the world, but it's also a little bit of a shit show out there. So it's being treated recreationally. I highly recommend it be more clinical, but that really helped open my heart up and shut down my ego for 2 to 4 hours. And that was really helpful and enlightening. And so with saying all of that, meditation, if I could go back in time and start over, I think if I just meditated, had a disciplined meditation practice, I'd probably be just as far ahead or further. And then this funny thought I have that's as depressing and painful as it is funny when I think of it. But to this whole point, I look back and I wonder, what if I didn't do any of those things? What if I didn't do any of those things? Where would I be today? And I have this weird, funny feeling I'd be right about where I am. And again, that may piss off every therapist, every book, every author, every whatever. But 5,000 years ago, we were taught to just meditate, to just be still. There weren't all these resources 5,000 years ago. So I think we got the message like a few thousand years ago, and we're still not getting it. But there are lots of resources. So I say all that, and I promise you, in the next year, I'll try 3 new things. It's just my nature. I'm like, I feel like I got to be the pioneer that goes out there and fills myself full of arrows and figures it all out and comes back to tell you the story and what I learned and what it did for me.
Yeah.
And so now, getting to your question, I'll be very vulnerable. There was a period where I really had to process and come to grips with my jealousy. So in my 20s, jealousy was a big issue for me. And I went through this really excruciating process of going to the root of jealousy. And it was beyond just a person. It was everything, people and things in my life. And I went through this process of, each layer was so painful, but digging deep into it and seeing the root was attachment and possession. And then digging down deeper and realizing it was me holding on and trying to protect everything in my life. And then literally going back to when I was 9 years old, and I used to literally have all my toys in a box, and I would protect those toys from anybody, and nobody could play with my toys. They were always in that safe little box, which is an amazing metaphor for how I lived my life in terms of trying to protect everything, and then getting to this place of just letting go of everyone. Going into that, I thought that I was the one being held on to by everybody, and everything's always the mirror. And I just saw it in an instant. Holy shit, I'm the one holding on to everybody. I'm the one feeling responsible for everybody. I'm the one trying to protect everybody. And man, that was so exhausting. And I just let it all go. So that was one of the most painful, but there have been many painful ones.
For sure.
How about you?
Well, first, I just want to say that you may have said this and I missed it, but in the book, we do list a whole bunch of resources. So, again, we're going to always urge you to go to the source there. So check those out.
Yeah. And Rob, too, what? Thank you for saying that, because I want to make sure I'm making it clear, because if you can't do this on your own, go get help, go use a resource. My God, don't feel like you have to do this on your own. Some of us need help. Some of us have very strong egos, and we need a sledgehammer to our ego to wake up.
So I'll share a few, but the first thing I want to say is therapy was the first way I went. And thank goodness it's very easily received these days. Back when I went, it was kind of not like it is today. So, but one of the things that I like that you've said, and I think it's important to know, is, are you really ready for it? You said in my 20s, I wasn't really ready for it. And I always encourage people when they go, and for myself now too, is to truly prepare and understand that this person isn't, just a sounding board. This person is here to do some work with you. Like, think about when you go to the medical doctor, and I think like, I need a solution to the pain that I'm experiencing in my body. Now I want a solution to the pain I'm experiencing in my mind, which, by the way, also can cause pain in your body, but that's for another time. Books, like you said, I seem to be drawn to, some of the more ancient philosophies. So that seems to be the books that have been useful. There's a person by the name of Jack Kornfield who has brought meditation and mindfulness to the West. And he was been very impactful in his writings and books, specifically a book called Wise Heart. And I'll segue that into meditation practice, because what I learned from Jack, in part from that book and many others, is that, if I can live my life with compassion, I can see the world in a different way in every moment. And that's easier said for me now than it was 20 years ago when I began a mindfulness practice and a meditation practice. But it truly has been a core for me. So whenever I'm experiencing angst, I can come and begin to look at that from a place of compassion and love and kindness as well. And you mentioned something earlier about, feeling love, having love in your life. And truly, for me, when I can look at a situation that is causing me angst, stress, anxiety, and say, I wish myself love and kindness, health and healing and safety and security, because that's all I want. That's all anybody wants. We're all the same. We all want the same thing at the end of the day. It's kind of core. We think we want other things, but really at the core, that's really what we want. And so those things have been very impactful for me. And it's funny that you brought up plant medicine, because I had been investigating plant medicine for a number of years, and I had determined I was going to go on a journey prior to the pandemic. And then I had to cancel because of the pandemic. And then you and I somehow started talking about it, and we didn't realize that that was on both of our minds. And so, we have both experienced that and watched each other's journeys. For me, when I think about the thing that's been most painful, it has been the 2 plant journeys that I have taken. They have been the most physical pain that I have felt. And I know in my intuition, in my true self, I was releasing so much from my body, so much trauma, so much that has gone on in my life. And so, that's what I think about. And I will do it again. And I plan to actually very soon. And I am, worried about how that might feel in my body. I kind of dread it, actually. But I do think that, for me, and I'm not suggesting everyone go run out and do this at all. Please investigate it, look into it, make sure it's right for you. I mean, really be thoughtful about it. As Gino said, it can be a bit of a shit show out there. But if you feel drawn to it and you've done all your fact finding and you find the right place, it has been shown to be, valuable for many. So those have been my experiences. And I don't know what comes to mind. Anything on your mind beyond that?
Two really strong points that come to mind, as we come into the close here, and I'm not sure what else you're going to ask, but you're going to ask about past lives. So I can't wait for that one. But there's nothing to add to everything that you said in your experience. But the thing this actually hit me today, because when we talk about discovery number 2, all decisions are made out of love or fear, and we drill down to the root of that, and the 3rd level talks about, it's the blocked energy level. And that's what we're talking about. This whole conversation is right where we are. And it's about, again, dissolving that cocoon that's around our soul, our true self. And we focus a lot on inner story in this journey. So there will be a future episode soon where we're going to get way into inner story. And we have a very powerful tool to help you understand what your inner story is and how to tell it and how to understand it and know what's going on below the surface. And we really focus on this in our mastermind, because this is where the magic happens. So all that said, if I've got everyone clearly seeing where we are, what I realize is the greatest shedding is to shed your inner story. What's really going on with the inner story is you're hanging on to this thing from the past, as I did, and I still do, because I haven't shed it all. But it's like this thing we carry that we're hanging on to, making some kind of meaning out of it. And it's an illusion. It's something our ego is hanging on to for God knows what reason. And the idea behind telling your inner story is to release it. And I want to make sure this disclaimer comes out as soon as possible, because we're not sharing inner stories to look for pity. We're not doing woundology. We're not trying to share our trauma. We're not looking for woe is me, poor me, sympathy, all that kind of stuff. It's to release it. The only reason you're telling it is to release it. And when you release it, you shed the layer. And if you can't release your inner story on your own, go get some darn help. So I just wanted to say that before you ask your next question.
That's so good. It's so good. I did want to mention one thing from the book that it might be relatable to some people. This is a story from Nathan Fox, and he shared with us for the book. He says, this journey is like surfing. It's like riding a wave down the face, then back to the crest where you hang on, and nature cooperates a little so you can ride down the face again. Each time you ride down the face, you are becoming one with the wave, eventually getting into the tube and having an even more exhilarating ride. And that came to me because of what you were saying about every time I shed layers, I feel bliss. And that's when he's in the, what does he call that? The tube. That's the bliss, but then you fall off the surfboard, get back up and try it again.
Okay.
So, okay, let's do this conclusion with this idea of past lives and what that means. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, first thing I want to share, another disclaimer, is I am hypersensitive in this work, this content, this context, this journey we're all on, is to stay agnostic, for lack of a better term. So what we're describing, it's not spirituality, it's not religion, it's not science, it's not mental health. It is none of that. It is all of that. I don't know what to call it, but I stay in a very narrow lane just from a standpoint of you get to call it whatever you want. If you are religious, this will make all the sense in the world. If you're spiritual, this will make all the sense in the world. If you're an atheist, this will make all the sense in the world. If you're science-based, so wherever you come from, this should make total sense. And that's where we stay, because we don't lean in any direction. You'll almost never be able to figure out what I believe, because I don't see any value in that. So we're not preaching a religion here. We are just trying to help you free your true self. So with that said, when you get into past lives, there are many people that don't believe in past lives. There are many people that believe this, we just go around once. And there are many people that do believe in past lives. So whatever you believe, I'm just going to answer your question based on what I've learned, what I believe. It's all irrelevant though. So, and that's why also I kind of reined us back in and said, let's solve this shit in this lifetime. Let's start there. And then if stuff from the past comes up. So, they talk about how trauma and pain is multi-generational. And so you don't have to get into the fact whether your soul lives on through many lives. Whether you believe it or you don't, this still works. What I'm about to say is still accurate, because it's just human conditioning. And so 1,000 generations back, our great, I'm going to say great 1,000 times, grandparents may have had some trauma and pain and put that into the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So think about it however you want. But if you think about that conditioning, it just stays. And so at least I know for me, I can look back 2 generations. I can look at my parents and their parents and think about some dynamics with awareness and consciousness. It will be very obvious. And I just see some conditioning that I experienced. And I can see that a conditioning I experienced was conditionally experienced by my parents from their parents. Now, unfortunately, I can't go back further than that, but I think you can if everybody's following the bouncing ball here. And so you can call that whatever you want, a past life, multi-generational, but these are conditioning, habits, teachings, lessons from our previous generations that stick with us. And so there's some stuff that my family learned that I'm trying to shed for the betterment of my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, my great-great-grandkids, and 1,000 generations from now. And I just happen to believe that that's possible.
I love it. I think the reason that came out of my mouth was I'm just so curious about all of it. That's really the truth of the matter. I don't have strong beliefs one way or the other. I'm just curious whether you're religious and that there's certain things about your religion that you're very passionate about. I love to learn that. And then there are some that have this idea that past lives have created an imprint on you. And, sometimes one might notice, like, how did I know that? That's kind of weird, and those kinds of things. I've heard different stories. So I just have curiosity about that. So thank you for feeding, allowing me to talk that through and have a brief conversation about it. But it is a good point that you say that, we're not here to say anything about the religion and spirituality and all that. This is not what this is all about. Just about having a conversation, really.
And I love that they like to say, whatever you believe, it works.
That's right. Thank you.
What we're teaching, it works.
All right, Gino. We did a good job today. I appreciate you and all the insight, as always, that you bring. And I'm just going to finish up here with the wrap. And I will share this just a few more times at the end of each podcast. I want to let you know that most of the podcasts will be on the shorter side, although this one wasn't. During each podcast, Gino and I will be expanding and providing additional flavors on the concepts from our book, Shine, the 10 Disciplines. We'll be sharing new content, and every now and then we will bring in a very special guest. Please check out Gino's solo riffs. They are so good. He's sharing what's top of mind for him. He's sharing concept from the books. He's sharing new learnings, personal experiences. For the podcast, as you noticed, I'll be asking a lot of questions, but the flow of our conversations will be pretty organic. So keep joining in each week. We're going to keep building like we have been so you can learn to shed layers, free your true self, and shine.
Thank you for listening in today. We truly appreciate you taking the time to spend with us, and please tune in for the next episode. Until then, if you'd like to see where you are on your true self journey, go to shedandshinepodcast.com to take the true self assessment and receive personalized guidance. If you're all ready to begin your inner world journey with Rob and myself, please join us for the next round of the 10 Disciplines group coaching program. We wish you all the best in freeing your true self. Stay focused, and much love.